Redfern, chapter 16. My mask back on. Pretend like I'm not pretend. I need to do my job. Okay. In the afternoon, our judge came over and introduced himself. He told me he told us he'd be going with us that night. About sundown, we piled in our buggy and drove a few miles downriver. I noticed other hunters doing the same thing. Everyone was trying to get away from the already hunted territory. It was dark by the time Grandpa stopped. I untied the ropes from my dogs. Little Ann reared up on me and whined. Old Dan walked off a few yards, stretched his body, and dragged his claws through the soft bottom soil. Opening his mouth, he let out one loud bawl and then disappeared in the thick timber. Little Ann was right on his heels. We took off after them. Grandpa got nervous. He said to me, "Don't you think you ought to whoop to them?" I told him to wait a little while. There would be plenty of time for whooping. He snorted and said he thought a hunter always whooped to his dogs. "I do, Grandpa," I said, "but not before they strike a trail." We walked on. Every now and then we would stop and listen. I could hear the loud snuffing of old Dan. Once we caught a glimpse of Little Ann as she darted across an opening that was bathed in moonlight. She was as silent as a ghost and as quick as a flitting shadow. Papa said, "It sure is a beautiful night for hunting." The judge said, "You can't beat these Ozark Mountain nights for beauty. I don't care where you go." Grandpa started to say something. His voice was drowned out by the bell-like cry of Little Ann. In a whisper, I said, "Come on, Dan, hurry and help her." As if in answer to my words, his deep voice hammered its way up through the river bottoms. I felt the blood tingling in my veins. That wonderful feeling that only a hunter knows crept over my body. Looking over at Grandpa, I said, "Now you can whoop." Jerking off his hat and throwing back his head, he let out a yell. It wasn't a whoop or a screech. It was a halfway in between. Everyone laughed. The coon was running upriver toward our campground. We turned and followed. I could tell by the dogs' voices that they were running side by side and were hot on the trail. Closing my eyes, I could almost see them running, bodies stretched to their fullest length, legs pounding up and down, white steam rolling from their hot breath in the frosty night. Grandpa got tangled in some underbrush and lost his hat and spectacles. It took us a while to find the glasses. Papa said something about getting them wired on with baling wire. Grandpa snorted and the judge laughed. The coon crossed the river and ran on upstream. Soon my dogs were out of hearing distance. I told Papa we had better stay on the side of the river and keep going until we could hear them again. 20 minutes later, we heard them coming back. We stopped. "I think they've crossed back to our side," I said. All at once, the voices of my dogs were drowned out by a loud roar. "What in the world was that?" Grandpa said. "I don't know," the judge said. "Reckon it was wind or thunder." About that time, we heard it again. The judge started laughing. "I know what it is," he said. "Those hounds have run that coon right back by their camp. The noise we heard are the other hunters whooping to them." Everyone laughed. A few minutes later, I heard my dogs bawl and treat. On reaching the tree, Papa ran his hand back under his coat. He pulled out Grandpa's gun. "That's a funny-looking gun," the judge said. "It's a 410 gauge pistol, isn't it?" Pause. DJ, did you get to read or listen to the chapter last night?
Yeah.
Okay. "It's the very thing for this kind of work," Papa said. "You couldn't kill a coon with it if you tried, especially if you're using birdshot. All it will do is sting his hide a little." At the crack of the gun, the coon gave a loud squall and jumped. My dogs lost no time in killing him. We skinned the coon and soon were on our way again. The next time my dogs treed, they were across the river from us. Finding a riffle, we pulled off our shoes and started across. Grandpa very gingerly started picking his way. His tender old feet moved from one smooth rock to another. Everything was fine until we reached midstream where the current was much swifter. He stepped on a loose round rock. It rolled and down he went. As the cold river water touched his body, he let out a yell that could have been heard for miles. He looked so funny we couldn't keep from laughing. Papa and the judge helped him to his feet, laughing every step of the way. We finally reached the other side. Grandpa kept going in his wet clothes until we reached the tree where the dogs were. After killing the coon, we built a large fire so Grandpa could dry his clothes. He'd get up as close to the fire as he could and turn this way and that. He looked so funny standing there with his long underwear steaming. I started rolling with laughter. Zeke.
Well, maybe little Ann might not be scared of the guns because they're using the bird shot, and that might not be as loud as normally. So maybe she's not as scared of it in this hunt because remember in the beginning, if they brought a gun, they had to have their own bird shot.
Right. So he says Zeke was talking about little Ann and how we've been told she's afraid of guns and she's gun shy. And I know you guys are very worried about what that might mean for the hunt. Grandpa pulled out the gun. They shot that first coon, but it has birdshot in it, which is a bunch of like just little like stuff. It's not like an actual like bullet. So it doesn't make the same noise when it shoots out. It's not as loud and startling. So they didn't mention that she was scared, and they went and treated another coon after. So I'm guessing the gun shy
Yeah,
isn't going to bother her since they're using birdshot and not like an actual bullet. Plus, they said it was a wimpy gun that wouldn't even hurt nothing. DJ.
I think that's why, like, he told him, like, don't bring, like, a big gun like that. Just, like, bring, like, a smaller gun. Like, bring one that won't scare him.
Right.
I think that's why he said that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. He was rolling with laughter at Grandpa. He looked over at me and snapped, "What's so funny?" I said, "Nothing." "Well, why are you laughing?" he said. At this remark, Papa and the judge laughed until their eyes watered. Mumbling and grumbling, Grandpa said, "If you fellas were as cold as I am, you wouldn't be laughing." We knew we shouldn't be laughing, but we couldn't help ourselves. The judge looked at his watch. "It's after 3 o'clock," he said. "Do you think they'll tree another one?" As if to throw the words back in the judge's face, old Dan opened up. I stood up and whooped. "Woo-wee! Get him, Dan, get him. Put him up a little tree." There was a mad scramble. Grandpa tried to put his britches on backwards. The judge and Papa ran over to help him with his shoes. Each one tried to put a shoe on the wrong foot, and I was laughing so hard I could do nothing. 100 yards from the fire, I realized we'd forgotten the coonskins, and I ran back for them. My dogs had jumped the coon in swampland. He tore out for the river bottoms. I could tell they were close to him by their fast bawling. All at once their baying stopped. We stood and listened. Old Dan bawled treat a few more times and then stopped. Grandpa asked, "What's happened?" I told him the coon had probably pulled some kind of trick. Coming up to my dogs, we saw they were working up and down an old rail fence. We stood and watched. Every now and then, old Dan would rear up on a large hackberry tree that was standing about 7 feet from the front fence and bawl treed. As yet, little Ann had not bawled the tree bark. We watched her. She was working everywhere. She climbed up on the rail fence and followed its zigzag course until she disappeared in the darkness. I told Papa I was sure the coon had walked the rail fence and in some way had fooled my dogs. Old Dan would keep coming back to the hackberry tree. He would rear up on it and bawl treed. We walked up to him. Looking the tree over, we could see that the coon wasn't in it. The judge said, "Looks like he has him fooled." "Maybe you'd better call him off," Grandpa said. "We can go someplace else and hunt. We've got to get one more coon, even if I have to tree it myself." For some reason, no one laughed at his remark. "It's almost daylight," Papa said. "Yes, that has me worried," I said. "We don't have time to do any more hunting. If we lose this one, we're beat." Hearing the word beat, Grandpa began to fidget. He asked me, "What do you think happened? How did that coon fool them?" "I don't know for sure," I said. "He walked that rail fence. The hackberry has something to do with this trick, but I don't know what." "Son," the judge said, "I wouldn't feel too badly if I were you. I've seen some of the very best hounds fooled by a smart old coon." Regardless of all the discouraging talk, the love and belief I had in my little red hounds never faltered. I could see them now and then leaping over old logs, tearing through the underbrush, sniffing and searching for the lost trail. My heart swelled with pride. I whooped, urging them on. In a low voice, the judge said, "I'll say one thing, they don't give up easily." Birds began to chirp all around us. The sky took on a light gray color. Tiny dim stars were blinking the night away. "It looks like we're beat," Papa said. "It's getting daylight." At that moment, the loud, clear voice of a red-boned hound, bawling treed, rang through the river bottoms. It was the voice of little Ann. Sucking in a mouthful of air, I held it. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. I closed my eyes tight and gritted my teeth to keep the tears from coming. "Let's go to them," Grandpa said. "No, wait a minute," I asked. "Why?" he said. "Wait till old Dan gets there. He says it's daylight now, and if we walk up to the tree, the coon will jump out. It's hard to keep a coon in a tree after daylight. Let's wait until old Dan gets there. Then if he jumps, he won't have a chance to get away." "The boy's right," the judge said. "It's hard to keep a coon in a tree after daybreak." Just then we heard old Dan. His deep voice shattered the morning silence. Searching for the lost trail, he had crossed the fence and worked his way out into an old field. Turning around, we saw him coming. He was a red blur in the gray morning shadows. Coming to the rail fence, and without breaking his stride, he raised his body into the air. About halfway over, and while still in the air, he bawled. Hitting the ground with a loud grunt, he ran past us. Everyone whooped to him. Ahead was a deep washout about 10 feet wide. On the other side was a canebrake. His long red body, stretched to its fullest length, seemed to float in the air as he sailed over it. We could hear the tall stalks rattling as he plowed his way through them. A bunch of sleepy snowbirds rose from the thick cane, flitted over, and settled in a row on the old rail fence. Nearing the tree, we could see it as a tall sycamore, and there, high on the top, was a coon. Grandpa threw a fit. He hopped around, whooping and hollering. He threw his old hat down on the ground and jumped up and down on it. Then he ran over and kissed little Ann right on the head. After we killed and skinned the coon, the judge said, "Let's walk back to that old fence. I think I know how the old fella pulled his trick." Back at the fence, the judge stood and looked around for a few minutes. Smiling, he said, "Yep, that's how he did it." "How?" Grandpa asked. Still smiling, the judge said, "That old coon walked this rail fence. Coming even with the hackberry tree, he leaped up on its side and climbed up. Notice how thick the timber is around here? See that limb way up there in the top, the one that runs over and almost touches the sycamore?" We saw what he meant. The coon walked out on that limb, he said, leaped over and caught the sycamore limb. Repeating this over and over from tree to tree, he worked his way far out into the river bottoms. What I can't figure out is how that hound found him. Gazing at little Ann, he shook his head and said, "I've been hunting coons and judging coon hunts for 40 years, but I've never seen anything like that." He looked at me. "Well, son," he says, "you have tied the leading teams. There's only one more night of eliminations. Even if some of them get more than 3 coons, you'll still be in the runoff. And from what I've seen here tonight, you have a good chance of winning the cup." I knew that little Ann had scented the coon in the air the same as she had the ghost coon. I walked over and knelt down by her side. The things I wanted to say to her, I couldn't for the knot in my throat, but I'm sure she understood. As we came into the campground, the hunters came out of their tents and gathered around us. The judge held up the 3 big coon hides. There was a roar from the crowd. One man said, "That was the most beautiful sight I've ever seen." "What was a beautiful sight?" Grandpa asked. "Last night, those little redheads brought that coon right through camp." The judge said, "We figured they did when we heard the noise." Laughing, the man said, "We heard them when they ran up the other side of the river. Way up above here, they crossed over. We could tell they were coming back, so we doused all the fires, and sure enough, they came right through the camp. Those 2 little hounds weren't 50 yards behind the coon, running side by side. Boy, they were picking them up and laying them down and bawling every time their feet touched the ground. I'll tell you, it was the prettiest sight I ever saw." When the judge started telling about the last coon little Ann had treed, I took my dogs over to our tent and fed and watered them. After they'd had their fill, I gave them a good rub down with a piece of gunny sack. Taking them out to the buggy, I tied them up. I stood and watched while they twisted around in the hay, making their bed. Zeke,
I think they're probably gonna sleep all day because they were up all night.
you think they're going to what?
They're gonna sleep all day.
You think they're going to sleep
So
all
you
day?
think It's probably gonna like skip to the next night, maybe.
Okay.
Or maybe like dinner.
Okay. Let's see. Zeke thinks it's going to skip. That day I tried to get some sleep in our tent, but the soaking Grandpa had taken in the river had given him a cold, causing him to snore. I'd never heard such a racket in all my life. I sworn he rattled the paper sacks in the grocery boxes. Taking a blanket, I went out to my dogs. Little Ann had wiggled up as close to old Dan as she could. Prying them apart, I lay down between them and fell asleep. The last night of the eliminations turned out like the second night. None of the judges turned in more than 2 hides. That day, about noon, the owners of the other winning teams and I were called in for a conference with the head judge. He said, "Gentlemen, the eliminations are over. Only 3 sets of hounds are left for the runoff. The winner of tonight's hunt will receive the gold cup. If there is a tie for the championship, naturally there'd be another runoff." He shook hands with each of us and wished us good luck.
I think there's gonna be a
Zeke says he thinks there's going to be a tie. Tension began to build up in the camp. Here and there, hunters were standing in small groups talking. Others could be seen going in and out of tents with rolls of money in their hands. Grandpa was the busiest one of all. His voice could be heard all over camp. Men were looking at me and talking in low tones. I strutted like a turkey gobbler. That evening, while we were having supper, a hunter dropped by. He had a small box in his hand. Smiling, he said, "Everybody's agreed we should have a jackpot for the winner. I've been picked to do the collecting." Grandpa said, "You may as well leave it here now." Looking at me, the hunter said, "Son, I think almost every man in this camp is hoping you win it, but it's not going to be easy. You're going up against 4 of the finest hounds there are." Turning to my father, he said, "Did you know the 2 big Walker hounds have won 4 gold cups?" Very seriously, Papa said, "You know, I have 2 mules down on my place. One is almost as big as a barn. The other one isn't much bigger than a jackrabbit, but that little mule can outpull the big one every time." Smiling, the hunter turned to leave. He said, "You could be right." Papa asked me again where I thought we should start hunting. I'm going to pause. Why did Papa tell the judge, "Well, I got 2 big mules and the little one's the better one"? Why did he say that? DJ.
Talking about the underdog.
Okay, Kane. Yeah, he was kind of comparing because the judge or the man that was collecting the money said that, well, he wasn't going to have an easy time with Old Dan and Little Ann. But Papa was basically saying, just because they're little, just because they're the underdogs and they're new to the competition, don't count them out. My littlest mule is the better mule, so.
It was the grandfather. Papa only
Was it Grandpa? No, it was Papa. Very seriously, Papa said, "You know I have 2 mules down at my place." Yeah.
I thought he had 1.
No, yes.
Apparently he has 2. All right. Okay. I had been thinking about this Papa asked me again where I thought we should start hunting. I'd been thinking about this all day. I said, "You remember where we jumped that last coon in the swamp?" Papa said, "Yes." "Well, way I figure, more than one coon lives in that swamp." I said, "It's a good place for them, as there are lots of crawfish and minnows in those potholes. If a hound jumps one there, he has a good chance to tree him." Papa asked, "Why?" "It's a long way back to the river, and about the same distance to the mountains." I said, "Either way he runs, a dog can get pretty close to him, and so he would have to take to a tree." That evening, we climbed into Grandpa's buggy and headed for the swamp. It was dark by the time we reached it. Grandpa handed Papa his gun, saying, "You're getting to be a pretty good shot with this thing." "I hope I get to shoot it a lot tonight," Papa said. Under my breath, I said, "I do too." After untying the ropes from my dogs, I held on to their collars for a minute. Pulling them up close, I knelt down and whispered, "This is the last night. I know you'll do your best." They seemed to understand and tugged at their collars. When I turned them loose, they started for the timber. Just as they reached the dark shadows, they stopped, turned around, and stared straight at me for an instant. The judge saw their strange actions. Laying a hand on my shoulder, he asked, "What did they say, son?" I said, "Nothing that anyone could understand, but I can feel that they know this hunt is important. They know it just as well as you or I." It was Little Ann who found the trail. Before the echo of her sharp cry had died away, Old Dan's deep voice floated out of the swamp. "Well, let's go," Papa said eagerly. "No, let's wait a minute," I said. "Wait? Why?" Grandpa asked. "To see which way he's going to run," I said. The coon broke out of the swamp and headed for the river. Listening to my dogs, I could tell they were close to him. I said to Papa, "I don't think he'll ever make it to the river. They're right on his heels now." By the time we had circled the swamp, they were ball and treed. The judge said, "Boy, that was fast." I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. Looking at me, he smiled and nodded his head. Papa and I knew I had judged the coon perfectly. He didn't have time to reach the river or the mountains. My dogs had treed the coon in a tall ash which stood about 50 yards from the river. I knew the 50 yards had saved us a good hour, because he could have pulled trick after trick if he'd gotten in the water. We spied the coon in the topmost branches. At the crack of the gun, he ran far out on a limb and jumped. He landed in an old fallen treetop. He scooted through it. Coming out on the other side, he ran for the river. The tangled mass of limbs slowed my dogs, and they all but tore the treetop apart getting out of it. The coon was just one step ahead of them as they reached the river, and we heard them hit the water. Running over, we stood and watched the fight. The coon was at home in the river. He crawled up on Old Dan's head, trying to force him under. Before he could do it, Little Ann reached up and pulled him off. In a scared voice, Papa said, "That water looks deep to me." "Maybe you'd better call them off," said the judge. "That's a big coon. He could drown one of them easily in that deep water." "Call them off?" I said. "Why, you couldn't whip them off with a stick. There's no use for any of them to get scared. They know exactly what they're doing. I've seen this more times than one." Grandpa was scared and excited. He was jumping up and down, whooping and hollering. Papa raised the gun to aim. I jumped and grabbed his arm. "Don't do that," I yelled. "You're sure to hit one of my dogs." Round and round in the deep water, the fight went on. The coon climbed on Old Dan's head and sank his teeth in one of his long, tender ears. Old Dan bawled with pain. Little Ann swam in and caught one of the coon's hind legs in her mouth. She tried hard to pull him off. All three disappeared under the water, and I held my breath. The water churned and boiled. All three came to the top about the same time. The coon was between the bank where we were standing on and my dogs. He swam toward us. They caught him again just as he reached shore. He fought his way free and ran for a large sycamore. Old Dan caught him just as he started up, and I knew that was the end of the fight. After it was all over and the coon had been skinned, Grandpa said, I hope we don't have to go through that again tonight. For a while I thought your dogs were goners. The judge said, well, have you ever seen that? Look over there. Old Dan was lying perfectly still with eyes closed and head hanging down. Little Ann was licking at his cut and bleeding ears. She always does that, I said. If you'll watch her, when she gets done with him, he'll do the same for her. We stood and watched until they had finished doctoring each other. Then, trotting side by side, they disappeared in the darkness. We followed along, stopping now and then to listen. All right. We're in the middle. We cannot read the next chapter. Okay. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the characters that we've already talked about, see if anything has changed. But when we get to Old Dan and Little Ann, I'm going to leave it to you guys because you have a Venn diagram to compare and contrast Old Dan and Little Ann, plus you've got your questions. So give me just a second. What was yeah.
We do need to take care of this off of Old Dan.
Yeah, I
Can I give you this instead?
Oh no! The Venn diagram isn't on the virtual version.
Wait, so that means we don't have to do it?
Oh no, we're doing it. They're just gonna have to draw their own Venn diagram, or I'll create one real quick. Hang on.
I give me this for the. Yay!
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, hang on before anybody.
Name is bad.
Wait.
It doesn't like start.
Gerb.
It's 5 seconds. Yeah.
All right, hang on, guys. What are you doing?
I'm waiting for the quiz.
Okay, there's the quiz from yesterday. Macy,
Yeah.
same thing. If you and we're going to be talking about the characters. If you and DJ want to sit in the hall, you can. There's a quiz on what we read up through yesterday. Okay. All right, friends. I'm going to pull this poster about the characters back over here. Some of you guys are having a conversation, and I'm not sure why. All right. We, a couple weeks ago, made this poster. Some of you are still talking, and I don't know why. We made this poster about the characters. Virtual friends, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but I want to kind of review the characters and see if there's anything that we think has changed. Anything we want to take off or add. Starting with Billy. Right now we've got that he's country. He's kind, he's honest, adventurous, determined, accomplished, dog lover, brave, imaginative, passionate, creative, has grit, which means he doesn't mind digging in. He's caring, courageous, thoughtful, smart, and patient. Anything we want to add to Billy? Has any of that changed? Anything we want to take away? I know it's not the original color. All right. What do we think? Is he still all of those things?
Yeah.
Even more so at this point? Like
Yeah, he's more patient now.
more patient. Okay.
He's still determined.
Still determined. I'm going to underline patient because I think you're right. As he's gone on these coon hunts, he's grown even more patient.
Braver. Well, let's give her thoughtful.
Thoughtful.
Well, he believes in his dogs too.
Okay.
You call that when you're like
Believer, yeah. Believer.
A believer. Is that how I want to word it? They're saying believes in his dogs. I agree with that.
He trusts him.
has faith in his dogs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very like fake.
Has faith. Okay. I think you could say has faith in his dogs. Also has faith in
Himself.
himself. Okay. So I'm just gonna leave it has faith. Okay.
I think that's like
I think determined.
he's
What's something else? Like when it comes to him and his dogs, and they kind of have this reputation for being really good. I'd almost say
about it.
he's what?
Humble about it.
Is he humble about it?
No. His grandpa isn't humble about it. No.
Grandpa's certainly not humble about it. Grandpa's bragging like it is his job.
Yeah.
And I do think that Billy isn't really humble either. In fact, I think that Billy's almost kind of like cocky about it, right? Like, yeah, my dogs are good. Of course we're gonna win. Like, duh, no dogs even have a chance. Confident? Do we have confident on there?
No.
We don't. I would say yes. I think confident's a good way.
Very confident about it.
Yes, has faith and is confident. I like that's a good choice of words, confident. All right, what about Grandpa? Let's see what we said about old Grandpa. Loyal, trustworthy, caring, appreciative, hard worker, thoughtful, and big-hearted. We've learned a lot more about Grandpa since we wrote this. All right, raise your hand. Share, Jason, what do you want to think about Grandpa?
Sneaky.
Sneaky?
He sneaked the wine or whatever it was.
He snuck the wine away from Grandma.
And he's like boastful.
Boastful. He does, yes, boastful for sure.
What is boastful mean?
Like brags a lot.
Which boastful? Like an underline or under boastful?
Boastful.
What is underline under that?
Underline boastful, like big time. Grandpa brags a lot.
He's
If
like
you hang on,
risk taking because he's like the best.
risk taking. Okay.
I can almost say that for Billy.
Well, gamblers.
Risk taker.
That's my grandpa. Sneaky.
Sneaky.
My dad. Daddy never put that.
I don't know if I want to use the word sneaky, but I think that Grandpa is because sneaky.
Dishonest.
I don't know. Dishonest. Ornery.
Yeah.
Ornery is the word I want to use because he's not a bad guy. Like the things that he's being dishonest or sneaky about aren't
really
like
bad.
they're not really bad.
Well, he
things.
did say, did you hide the wine good?
He's just being an ornery boy. He's not any worse than any of y'all in here. I think Grandpa is an ornery. I'll put sneaky, but I think ornery's the better word. Okay.
Wait, is that circle them both together?
Okay.
Because they both
What about Mama?
He is
innocent?
She's innocent.
Pregnant.
She is pregnant, but that's not a character trait.
Sean.
What?
She's pregnant.
She's pregnant, but that's not a character trait.
Pregnant with a child?
No, guys, drop it. Yes, she's pregnant, but that's not a character trait. A character trait.
You were saying it too.
I was going to say something within you, but pregnant is something
got
within you.
So
So,
what is
all right, we have that she's loving, kind, family focused, hardworking, makes the best of things. She's forgiving, thankful, selfless, hopeful, emotional, innocent. Why do you think she's innocent?
Because she does nothing wrong.
Mama does nothing wrong.
She's
Okay. Parker, what do you think?
Protective on it.
Protective. I do like that one. Yeah.
Knows how to take care of a child instead of giving her coffee.
Protective. Josie, what do you think?
I was gonna say like worryful.
Worried. Yep.
Yeah, because she's
Worried.
worried about Billy going on those hunts at night.
Okay. Worried, protective, worried. All right. Sophie. What?
Sweet.
Sweet. Okay. All right. What about Dad? We've got Tough exterior, soft interior. So tough on the outside, soft on the inside. Hardworking, intelligent, selfless, meaning he puts others first. Hopeful, loyal, thoughtful.
Smart.
Do what?
Smart.
Smart. What else about Dad?
Mule loving.
Do what? Mule loving?
We said that last time.
Mule loving.
I'm not gonna put mule loving.
That's what Jason said last time.
All
He
right.
said that's not a character trait.
Also not a character
Yeah,
trait.
but how is
Still not.
dog loving a character
Oh.
trait?
Caring.
Because they made it a whole sickness in the book at the beginning. Like it was like
How come you
affected
can
him
dog loving
personally.
but not
Yeah, that's
mule
how
loving?
the meal like
That's how
no.
mules work on
Dad.
dogs.
Okay, focus. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Coon hunting. Caring.
Is caring.
Or Billy.
All right, I do think he is caring. We've seen more caring than we have before.
Sure. He's kind of like caring about mules.
Oh my god.
I have a good one. Let's see if
Caring about mules.
No, it's not caring about
proud. Did I hear somebody say proud?
Yeah, proud.
Proud. I like proud.
He's like proud of Billy.
Proud of Billy.
You Mule.
Kind of along that same lines. Something that I feel when I think about how Dad treats Billy,
Treats him like a man.
he's but here, but both Grandpa and Dad are treating Billy like he's older. He's drinking the coffee.
Yeah,
and
Big deal.
He's
Um,
a man.
Hi, you're about to owe time. In addition to the time that you already owe from yesterday.
Oh yeah, we have fun.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, stop with the jokes. I'm trying to do a serious assignment. Enough. All right. So when I think about Dad and Billy, I'm thinking he's very what if Billy needs something, Dad makes sure
So Billy loving.
he has it. Go sit in the hall. No, now.
What about child loving?
Riley.
Protection.
Protective? No, not quite. He is, but I think that Mom is the protective one. I think Grandpa and Dad give him kind of room to go do what he wants. Supportive is the word I would use. What do you guys think? Like, Dad is supportive. Whatever Billy wants, Dad's like, yep, I trust you. Parker, what do you think?
I have a look kind of for Dad and Grandpa.
Okay.
Like during this chapter, they were kind of impatient.
Impatient? Okay.
Well, that's
Yeah. In this chapter they did both, Grandpa and Dad seem a little bit impatient. I could get down with that. Grandpa for sure. Also, what do we think of rewinding to Grandpa?
Grandpa's
All his like
clumsy.
jumping up and down and hooping and hollering and dancing.
And he's
Energetic.
I can't hear all the energetic. I like energetic, especially when you don't think of a grandpa like that. So I think it's worth noting that.
And I think like clumsy because he kept like falling,
Clumsy, okay.
dropping his stuff.
kept falling in the river, fell in the branches, lost his glasses. We're gonna see more clumsy grandpa
Yay.
later. All right, now I'm gonna tell you what we have for old Dan and little Ann, but then I'm gonna leave it for you guys to do the Venn diagram. Virtual guys, the Venn diagram isn't on yours, so I'm gonna have to add it in. So if you just be patient, I will get that added. It might have to be a separate assignment because it's not letting me edit the one that's already there. For old Dan, what we have so far is strong, careless.
Not anymore.
Do we think that old Dan is careless?
No, he used to be though.
He's careful.
Playful, brave, stubborn, and
I don't think
determined.
he's
He's
stubborn.
courageous.
I don't think he's
Courageous?
stubborn anymore. I don't think he's stubborn anymore. You said you're not putting anything on it because we have to.
Okay, you're right. For little Ann, all we have is little, smart, loyal, and caring. So,
Miss Cat, mark off stubborn for old Dan. Well, he kind of
I don't know. Okay, so you guys have a Venn diagram. You guys, I'm going to add this onto yours. Give me just a second to add it on for you guys. But you're going to obviously, you know how a Venn diagram works. On this part, you're going to put the things that are only for old Dan. Over here, you'll put the things that are only little Ann. And any character traits that are the same, you'll put in the middle. Think about, like yesterday, Kane talked about how they don't do anything without each other, like how supportive they are of each other. Yesterday, they wouldn't eat without each other. Today, they were taking care of each other's wounds. I think there's something significant with that. So they're both very caring with each other. Okay, so you are going to do the questions and the vocab. Hello. You are going to do the questions and the vocab today. Okay? And the Venn diagram. You should have time. All right. So virtual friends, if you want to work on the questions, and I'll get the Venn diagram uploaded for you guys. All right, and I will leave this up here in case anybody needs to see it. All right, so you guys, I'm going to hit stop record, but I'll leave it running that way. If you want to stay on, I can tell you when I've got it fixed.